Welcome back to another video, everyone. Today it is quite fascinating because we've actually seen Valve move away from the Battle Pass. The Battle Pass, if you don't remember, is actually something that they essentially created with Dota, and now they've actually got a plan to go away from it, and they've talked about why. Hearthstone is then trying to twist up their formats to get a bit more engagement. Squeenix has actually made a step to right one of their really big and very bad looking wrongs, and we've got the story of a developer somehow being able to turn the fortunes of their game around so successfully within just a few days of launch that they've went back up new and trending somehow, which really is quite impressive. For as much as we like them, it's funny with Valve. I mean, loot boxes, they kind of drove a lot of that forward, kind of created it as well. Battle passes, they kind of created that. It's funny, they're actually the origin point of quite a lot of things in the industry that we don't particularly love. And unlike loot boxes and hats, their most recent blog post is seeing Dota's monetization actually move away from the Battle Pass model. Effectively, they've said that the Battle Pass has become the way that all significant Dota updates had been delivered. And they basically realized this, and then realized that they were very much limiting themselves to one type of update for all players. In their own words, they said, most Dota players never buy a Battle Pass and never get any rewards from it. It's one of those things, Battle Passes don't target whales, but they do target minnows. And they've probably realized that whatever their strategy is for the Battle Pass, it's not actually being particularly effective. So they say that because they realized this, they started experimenting with things this year. And instead of building Battle Pass content, they've been working on further content updates and improvements to the game. And per their post, this kind of thing is really, really working, right? Here's what they say. Every Dota player has gotten to experience the new map, play with new items, and accidentally die to a tormentor. Every Dota player benefits from UI improvements and new client features. So essentially for them, it is a question of resources and who should actually be benefiting from their own allocation of those resources. And in Dota, loads of that was going towards people who purchased that Battle Pass, when they think it could be going for everybody. Now, the thing to remember, though, is that Valve's implementation of a Battle Pass is actually pretty different to many other companies. So this is a lesson that may take some time to percolate to other parts of the industry. I think their core point, though, is make game bigger by making more people happy and doing more updates, somehow equal money later. Now, before I dive into what a Dota Pass actually looks like, there is one humongous elephant in the room that it would be totally unfair to everybody else to not bring this up. So, Valve, I don't want to say that Valve owns the PC platform in the same way that Sony owns the PlayStation. That's obviously not the case. But the vast majority of PC game purchases are made on Steam. So for Valve, it's almost as if they're getting the benefit of that, 30/70 cut on the PlayStation Store or the Xbox Store, just that unlike Sony and Microsoft, Valve don't have to make a console. I mean, they do with the Steam Deck, but the point basically is they dominate the platform. They have an absurd amount of revenue that is coming from their store cut. Therefore, they do just play by a different set of incentives. And for them, the idea of squeezing as much money out of Dota as they possibly can, that's just not as important to their bottom line as the core of their business, which is facilitating the purchase of PC games and taking a cut for being that middleman. That is how Valve makes its money. So essentially with Dota 2 Battle Passes, they actually had quite a lot of, features, content, that sort of thing, sometimes unique modes, right? So they weren't just very narrowly the sorts of cosmetics that perhaps you'd be more used to in something like an Overwatch 2 or Diablo 4. So I think the Battle Pass model probably was hurting that game a little bit more than some others hurt other games. So certainly we will need to see what this is replaced with. Now, if you don't remember, the Compendium is what Valve basically released. It had a bunch of content in it. I think it had some predictions and some other stuff. You would buy the Compendium and a portion of that money would go towards the International, which was the big Dota competition. Of course, the Battle Pass format then sprouted out from there. I just want to see what they replace it with, right? Because it's not like they're going to remove Battle Passes from Overwatch and from Diablo. That's definitely not going to happen. What I want to know, though, is does Valve have a plan to still make plenty of money from Dota without having to rely on the Battle Pass? Will that plan work? Or is this a case of them not caring about making money from Dota as much because, frankly, Steam is the only thing that matters? If that latter thing is the case, then this won't be as much of a lesson towards the rest of the industry because, well, those companies are just... I mean, it's not like 90+% of PC games are purchased via Battle.net, is it? So that's that story. I would say, if you want to buy something on Steam, you could check out The Pale Beyond. It is the game that we developed. It's one of those things, those new people coming into the channel. Yes, it is a survival narrative role-playing game. If you know of the stories of, say, Ernest Shackleton, maybe you watch The Terror on TV, you know, that great sort of exploration, in our case, Antarctica inspired, then I think there's a hell of a lot that you'll enjoy. We're currently, I think it's like 91 overall on Steam, which I'm absolutely thrilled with. So you can check out that at the link that is down below. Now that I'm done shilling, let's talk about Square Enix. They have unscrewed one of their games and released it. So here's the deal. Chocobo GP was released March 10th, 2022. It was a complete shit show. The game was absolutely full of bugs, and the microtransactions were ludicrously expensive. It was all weird for a, Chocobo GP game, because as a game, it was perfectly reasonable. Now, this overall, though, meant that even though it was a pretty reasonable game, all the monetization, all the bullshit, people just didn't want to go anywhere near it. Square Enix then announced that its 5th season would be its last and that they would cease game updates. They then turned off the in-game currency this January, and now they've sort of decided to do an interesting double dip and release the game as a premium product. So now the game is back. It's got a price tag of $49.99 USD, $39.99 British pounds, and Nintendo Life are reporting that all cosmetics, characters, and all other things are just in the game with no microtransactions. There is an additional caveat though. If you had Chocobo GP Lite, the free version, then you will have to pay to update, regardless of whether you put a bunch of microtransaction money in. So yeah, that's kind of sucky. If you didn't buy Lite, then hey, this is good news. If you did buy Lite, did buy microtransactions, then that's kind of rough. Overall, though, this is an example of live services failed. They have salvaged the actual game, and now it is a game that people can just go and play. There is no sort of live service element in it. Now that's, it's a strange thing overall, because in one way you do see it as, oh yeah, okay, so it failed, you're obviously not going to do any more updates, now you're just going to release it, and you're double dipping. That's one side of it. The other side of it is, the live service failed, now they're releasing the game without all the bullshit. You'd like to think that if this was something they did decently, then that it would kind of show, hey, maybe you don't need to ruin and kill your game before the darn thing has ever, has even had a chance to get players' interest, which is exactly what happened with the original launch of Chocobo GP. So, have to see what we think there. Next then, Hearthstone. So, they're removing Classic Mode, which is quite something. Hearthstone, it really seems that they've had so many swings and misses. Mercenaries, total failure. Obviously, Battlegrounds, it almost became the default way that people played Hearthstone. Now then, they are removing Classic Mode. It's being discontinued and replaced by a new beta ladder mode called Twist, where basically the format and the conditions and eligible cards will regularly change to basically create an evolving game state. So the initial card selection is called New Age, and in that, only the core set plus any expansion after Ashes of Outland is included. So their idea here is that by artificially restricting the selection that can be played here, the players will have to adapt, and that overall that will shake up the game with like the different seasons and eras of this new version of I suppose what was originally the Classic Mode. And as for why, well, they basically just said that the interest for Classic was really high at first, but it lost engagement super quickly. Of course, because it's a static thing, it didn't change or anything like that. Now, per their reporting, they being PC Gamer, they also did challenge the idea that some people may be losing out. People who spent money on packs for Classic to then go and lose the classic format. And when PC Gamer put this criticism to Blizzard, Blizz said that the classic packs do contain cards that were valid in classic, but the wild versions of those cards are still valid in wild. So not ideal, and if somebody did buy those packs specifically to play that mode, they are now expressly shit out of luck. This is at least more successful, or I suppose less damaging, than the way that they ended the Mercenaries mode. It's quite funny with Mercenaries. It really did seem like a way to just get more money out of the game, and it totally failed. It really does seem that Battlegrounds is kind of where it's at. Our final story then is one that's actually really good. So, Fail Better Games, they make exceptional narrative titles. Of course, they're a studio who I'd say are quite in the wheelhouse of our studio. Pale Beyond, narrative title, the likes of Fallen London, Sunless Sea, Sunless Sky, narrative games. So, we respect that stuff. Now, they have had a romance VN called Mask of the Rose that is set in the Fallen London mythos. Fallen London itself being an absolutely fascinating sort of game. Anyhow, people were very on board with the idea. They got £171,000 of a £90,000 goal in Kickstarter. Of course, though, when something like that happens in Kickstarter, that's more just, that's like a community building thing. The money's really useful, and there are certainly cases where that money maybe will be matched by a publisher or something like that, or maybe not in this case specifically, but broadly speaking, Kickstarter, the game's going to cost more than 171 grand to make. Absolutely, easily more than that. Anyway, the game was released 8th of June, and things actually didn't go quite well. And it's interesting. The game had a very tight time limit, right? And the idea with the time limit is you'd only be able to do so many interactions, choose so many options, do so many things. And I think their overall design intent is that players would be playing it quite intentionally, that there would be a push and pull that would make some choices perhaps feel more, just feel more important. And the thing with Fallen London is, with it being an ongoing sort of live narrative experience, you only have so many actions per day in Fallen London. So I think they were trying to play in that design space of having only so many actions a day. Because obviously, if you only have so many actions in a day, then what you decide to do is really impactful. It's a bit like, in some of those harvesting or farming games, you only have so much stamina and you need to sleep to get it back. And that's just the way they balance the game. But it didn't really work out this time. And I think that's because in the visual novel format, people wanted to more fully explore the content. There is the sort of, there's the romance element of it, there's some other elements of the narrative, and I think people felt that if they engaged a lot with where they maybe naturally wanted to go, they wouldn't get everything else that they'd want to see in the same run. It just wasn't coming together as an experience, and this led to a mostly negative on Steam, which obviously is pretty rough, right? Getting mostly negative, so that's not good. That was the initial launch. It did crawl up slightly after that, but what has been interesting is they've actually went and turned the damn thing around, and they've got back into new and noteworthy on Steam, which is, a pretty lovely story. Like, there you can see it. 4 ranks there on, on that just behind F1 and AIM Labs. So that really is quite impressive. They've got their Steam score up quite a bit as well. It's not the most amazing, it is 101 reviews at 73%. Certainly, I think this is a studio that would be more targeting like a 90%, but it's moved in the right direction for them. We can look at the graph here and we can see a lot of that negative response was very early on, right? Now, in terms of statistical significance, these are not the biggest review numbers. 12 positives, 22 negatives, right? For like day 2. But if you look here, 3 positives, 6 positives, 3 positives to 1 negative. A few days later, 4 positives to 1 negative. So they are slowly accruing the positive reviews. If that trend holds over time, then perhaps this game could get up to very positive, which I believe is over 80%. I think it's over 80%. And then I think overwhelmingly, or no, maybe it's over 90%. Anyway, overwhelmingly positive is 95% and over 500 reviews. So if your game can get that, it truly is a remarkable thing. It's funny with Pale, we're sitting at 91, and it's one of those things where I've been thinking Could we get to 95? But you actually look at how the numbers shake out, and it'll be pretty hard to do that. And to look at what they did, well, they just said the seasons of Confessions and Yule are both twice as long, 14 days instead of 7. This is in response to hearing how you felt you couldn't get your teeth into enough of the stories in-game. We've now let you loose, as it were, and are looking forward to basically, hearing what people, what people think. Also, some things like just improving tutorialization and a few knock-on effects for that sort of lengthening of the seasons. It's the sort of thing I'm not going to get fully into it here, but it is a really good example of a developer being hyper-targeted and hyper-responsive to issues that people have found. I mean, hell, it almost reminds me of Diablo 4, where a lot of people have been complaining about the renown grind. People have been talking about, like, the nightmare dungeons aren't giving enough XP. And very rapidly, Blizzard turned around and said, all right, we've heard your concerns. Fair enough. We're working on them. These fixes will be in before Season 1. Like, that's exactly what you want to hear developers do. And that's why when developers do it, it's important that we actually call that out and make sure that people, to make sure that people are aware. I think one thing that is interesting here is a note on fast forwarding and replays. Some players have asked if there could be a skip scene option, or if the fast forward mode could automatically stop when you get to text that you've read like in another playthrough. So I think like Long Live the Queen, where it just zoops through stuff super quick. They do say though, unfortunately, it's not really possible for Mask of the Rose. The way it generates text is a bit too complex for this to work. Rather than set speeches, it uses a combination of pre-written lines and lines that are generated programmatically from written components. To actually go into that, I don't know if they're using Inkle. Inkle's like the fundamental tech that we're using. But like with Inkle, you have a lot of, it's basically like marrying some programming principles with, sort of tree-based dialogue. And it means that you can make far more like natural and immersive dialogue than when you can just extremely see, oh yeah, this is just a dialogue tree, like I've seen in games from like 15 years ago. So it is actually quite a bit harder with some of the way that modern games are working. That said, we do actually have at least for the UIs, handling everything, a fast forward in Pale. I think if you hold the B button, circle/B in a controller, and I forget what it is on PC. I should really remember that. Anyway, so good news from Mask of the Rose, an example of a developer doing the sort of thing that we definitely want to praise when we see it happen. That is it for today's video, though. If you want to support what we're doing, you can pick up The Pale Beyond on Steam. Depending on when this video goes out, it should be 20% off. It's down there. We've released a bunch of updates, including a full rebalancing of difficulty and a new hard mode. We did that, sort of post-launch. Certainly it was fun going through our own launch period. We had some bugs rear their heads. Everybody just, went really hard trying to fix those super quickly, which thankfully we did. And yeah, now as it stands, we do have a little bit more that'll be coming out of the game, but that'll be probably in a month or two. Month and a half. Yeah, you'll know more in a month and a half. Anyway, Pale Beyond, if you want to support what we're doing, you can pick that up on Steam. And with that said, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.